Welcome to Trending in Education. It's March Madness time, and we're talking about our Learning Trends March Madness brackets, which are about to drop like they're hot right at the top of March. It'll be maddening throughout the month of March, and then it'll culminate with the anointing of a new winner. So it'll be super exciting. We've been doing this for 3 years. This is the fourth time we're doing it. We'll be heading down to South by Southwest EDU to do a live event as part of that conference in the middle there. And it's something that we're going to be tracking throughout March as sort of a parallel feed to Trending in Education. You'll still be getting your more traditional fare Trending Education throughout March. But March Madness is something that's exciting. It wouldn't be March Madness if we didn't have the dulcet tones of Dan Strafford participating in the excitement. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm going to do my best William Jonathan Drayton Jr. impersonation. You may know him as Flavor Flav.
Nice.
He is the hype man of all hype men, or hype men, whichever it is. But he is my muse here. I'm excited. I think how we've grown this each year, how the topics have really come together. One, our trend spotting, what we've seen in the future, what we've seen from education over the past 4 years, but it's also a way just to understand what the listeners are into and what they think are important topics. So I think yet again, we're expanding the field where we're getting a little bit bigger. We're getting more matchups in. We're bringing in a special guest in Rohit Bhargava to help us out as well. So it's all moving forward, which I really dig. And I think this is going to be, the fourth year is going to be the best. And then we build on it from there.
Yeah, and you mentioned Flavor Flav, notorious hype man, but at the same time, don't believe the hype. It's like, make up your mind, Flav.
Right?
Do I believe the hype? Do I not believe the hype?
Tell me what you need me to do.
Yeah. But yeah, so it should be exciting. We've had fun with this in the past. I think we will have fun with this year. We're still finalizing the field, but the idea is 32 slots. 4 buys, so 28 teams, and we're going to have 4 first-round buys, and then we're going to get into it pretty quick. So this show will coincide with the launch of this. It's all going to be run on Twitter, at Trending in Ed. If you listen to the show and you don't follow at Trending in Ed on Twitter, Dan in particular does a nice job managing that Twitter presence. But it's a good place to get the latest and the greatest articles and topics and recordings of shows. And it's also where we're going to be running the polls that will give you the chance to vote. And then also we'll be talking about how you can make predictions throughout this as well. So we try to, like I said, have a little bit of fun with it. And we'll also be talking to Melissa Griffith and Brandon Jones later on in this show, just to fully round out the hype team, to talk to Brandon about the storied history of March Madness, and I want to hear you talk about that a little bit more, Dan, as well. And then Melissa, as our new participant, our new principal member of the team, who's going to be, really talking about our March Madness throughout the month, and she'll be with us down in Austin with Rohit. It's fun to get some fresh eyes on this at the same time. So anything just in terms of the history or the topics or any insider's tips for folks who might be thinking about the predictions they're going to want to make about Trending in Education's March Madness this year, Dan?
I think there is plenty to learn from past execution of this. You look back at 2017, our first year, we had the tie between AI, machine learning, and the importance of teachers, which I think looking back makes a whole lot of sense as we continue to move forward here. 2018, it was kid solving, which still in the news, not nearly as much here in 2020, but was a big deal with the Parkland shooting, unfortunately, and then what came out of that, the March for Our Lives, and then in 2019, interactive everything over human-centered STEM.
Yeah.
And I think bringing back some of the topics in the past show, one, that there is still life after March Madness. You can continue on. Just because you make it 1 year doesn't mean you won't be back the following year. But I do also think it shows that education and learning is an ever-evolving landscape. There are things constantly happening, but a lot of it is rooted in a foundation and things that we can come back to and talk about in different ways and different years. So the matchups are exciting. I'll say this for anyone who's into it. On Trending in Ed over on Twitter, we're going to pin a tweet and have a thread for all the voting. So you can go to one spot. You'll be able to go through, vote in each matchup. Share it. share it with friends, share it to get your candidate off the ground. Make sure you give us a hashtag of March Madness. But this way, we get more votes, we get more interaction with it, because I think this affects everyone. I know it's proselytizing a little bit about education here, but learning and education, it's lifelong. It's at work, it's in the classroom, it's in the house. So I want to know what you guys think is the most important stuff here. So share and share a lot, vote and vote often.
Yeah, early and often, right? As they say. And it's super zeitgeisty that it's an election year and we're asking people to vote, So a lot of primaries are going to be happening. I think we might try to squeeze a show in to the month about Super Tuesday, and then also talking about the zeitgeist. This coronavirus nonsense will not simmer down. So like we did a show on that, a couple weeks ago, and it just keeps taking off. It is going coronaviral, as we did say.
All jokes aside, and coronaviral is a very good one, but all kidding aside, Japan's shutting down their schools for up to 4 weeks. It's going to the end of.
Yeah.
So this is going to be something that at least story-wise stays with us for a while. Not a doctor. I have no prediction about how long this spreads or if a pandemic is happening or whatever it might be. But the story of it, of how it affects supply lines, how it affects manufacturing, and affecting children's education, and the idea of learning from home. How many more people turn to online mediums to pick up where maybe they're not getting it in person? It's a really important story, and one we'll definitely track here.
Yeah, and it's another one where, as we're finalizing the entrance for our March Madness, there probably will be something late that is a nod to that, and that could be a runaway, because even when we were talking about kid solving, Parkland happened, in March of that year. So like that's the voting, it did wind up being a runaway. But even if you do think about the activation around climate change among the younger generations, we did a show on OK Boomer recently, the generational passing of the torch that's happening on a number of fronts. They're multiple torches are passed at the same time. It's like a relay race where, 4-5 batons are passed all at the same time. But there is a lot of really interesting stuff around the generational tensions and the opportunity to sort of unlock some of the rising potential of the younger generations. Those things are certainly emerging also as we head into the 2020 election. So there is almost a palpable zeitgeist right now. It reminds me a little bit of year 2000, even just around Y2K too, at least as someone who was in New York, Y2K right on through 9/11, the same level of fear around what you're breathing.
Yep.
Just a quote unquote healthy paranoia. There is that idea of just everyone is on edge. And it's an important time to just think about mental health and think about the things that are restorative to you. And that's another set of themes that I think are super interesting. So we're hyping the hype, Dan, but any other quick thoughts just as because we're going to want to squeeze in some time with Melissa and Brandon before we wrap.
Yeah, the generational stuff I think is fascinating. I think there are many, many angles to it, and you see so much information coming out each and every day, not only the tension, but workforce readiness and who's entering the workforce, who's leaving the workforce. I think last I saw, it was actually the Generation X and Boomers who were the highest rising in entering the workforce because people are going back to work. Very intriguing to track that as we move forward. And, it's a topic that's sort of spread throughout a couple of the entrants this year. We've talked about it many times, the private-public partnerships, the idea of continuing education, the idea of going pro early and basically getting a job to then get your education while you're working. This all plays into, to me, a larger discussion around the whole person, the whole student, whatever it might be. How are we balancing this digital age, this constant having to be doing something, whether schooling or working, family care, and how are we understanding that from how it affects us? Affects social emotional learning, but also affects our ability to learn, to remember, to change and grow. I think it all plays together. And while these topics may seem disparate at points, there's a lot of connective tissue throughout all of them that can really make for broad discussions, and I hope really interesting discussions as we go forward this month.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gumbo, maybe a jambalaya.
A nice hearty stew.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's chunky still.
Right.
Like it's not like a fine bisque. But
No, you sop it up with some bread. Yeah, exactly. Totally.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with bisques too. Just to be clear, like we're definitely we're diverse and inclusive in our hot soup proclivities. But yeah, so we're gonna hear more from Melissa and Brandon, and then you'll be hearing a ton from Dan and me throughout March on the March Madness front, and then also we'll still be releasing shows that are more traditional trending in education. And thanks again for listening. Follow us on Twitter. That's where you can track the March Madness, and we'll pick up with more action. Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here, joined by Melissa Griffith. Melissa, welcome to today's show.
Thank you. You didn't ask me how I'm doing, Michael.
Well, now I'd love to know how you're doing now that you raised that topic. Yes.
Still living my best life.
Nice.
Still living my best life.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. What's making your life great? Like what are some of the things that make this your best life?
You know, it's a lot about what we are going to be talking about today. The weather is warming up as we head into March. You know, I'm excited because we're heading down to South by Southwest, which is my first time in Austin.
Yes.
As well. So, and then I get to participate on this pod at South by Southwest, which is going to be amazing. I've been trying to boot Brandon from this show for years, so I can get into this particular show. What's trending. So I'm very excited to be here. So
yeah. So yeah, and that's just a sliver of how your life is your best. But that's an important sliver. And yeah, so we're going to be at South by Southwest EDU. Those of you who are going to be attending that conference, it's a lot of fun. We were down there last year, recorded a live show. We're back there again this year, recording a live show. And this year, Melissa, we have a special guest. In addition to you attending the first time, like you're our regular special guest, and then there's our special guest, Rohit Bhargava of the Non-Obvious Company.
Yes, and I love Rohit's book, so I'm very excited to meet him in person, share the stage with him. It should be a lot of fun. Right? He's very good on the trends. He's always setting them. I'm really curious to have a conversation with Rohit about what trends in the last couple of years that he hit on and which ones he missed on. And so it'll be very interesting to hear what he thinks about that and dive into that as well.
Yeah, and as part of our March Madness tournament, there's a few ideas, a few entries that are specifically out of Rohit's new book, Non-Obvious Megatrends, which just launched in January. We had Rohit on the show to talk about his book right when it was dropping, and then a nice opportunity to connect back with him, get a read on his trends, and then also get a read on the entire field. 28 trends this year. You know, historically we've done 16. We almost doubled that. We very nearly doubled it. We decided to go to 28 with 4 buys. So there'll be four trends that are going to get a buy in the first round, and the rest of the trends are going to square off in a first round. We'll announce the Sweet 16 with Rohit down at South by Southwest EDU, and then continue to watch the field pair off and square off with winners being determined for each round, culminating in the top learning trend of 2020, which we are going to determine in the beginning of April. It's going to be outstanding. It's always a blast when we announce the winners. And yeah, so as someone who's just beginning to get acquainted with the ins and outs, you know, the travel opportunities, the conference, you know, like your head must be spinning. But then if you look at the brackets themselves, you know, we're still finalizing the field. What are your thoughts, Melissa, just coming in at this fresh?
You know, it's interesting, right? Because even before we started doing this trend and education and the actual trends, like there have been trends that you see in education all the time. And it's interesting to me because I've been looking back at your past brackets, right? And things like AR have been on the trends in and out. So as AI, so as things. And I think it's going to be interesting to get different perspectives on it. But some of these trends it's like you always quote that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I think that's happening with a lot of these trends. So I'm curious that as we look back on them, like, will those trends eventually play out or will they just fade away? Like one of them that I think that has always been in history for a while is personalization. We've talked about it for a while, and it seems like that is not quite, there's some variation of personalization that's still happening and playing out, but not to the extent that I think we once would have thought of back in the day. So I'm very curious of where the trends, like I see some of the trends you've been talking about, what interactive everything won
Last
last
year, yeah.
year. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how you've seen it play out over the last year?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we try to do a mix of capturing the themes that are around sort of more broadly. So things like artificial intelligence, you mentioned augmented reality, those tend to get in each year. Once something wins, we tend to retire it. So this year, where there's not going to be enough just AI machine learning entry, there's not going to be the importance of teachers, kid solving, or interactive everything, because each of those have one. There was a tie the first year between AI and the importance of teachers. So they co-won that as like a combination, both end. It takes the humans and the AI to win the game. So that was year one. Year two, kid solving, that coincided with the March for Our Lives after the shooting in Parkland, Florida. So that very much kind of ran away with the tournament year two. And then last year, interactive everything won, kind of out of nowhere. Sometimes it winds up being what has the catchiest turn of phrase that might get people's attention. I think the idea that flat, non-interactive stuff is just less sticky, less engaging. And I think generally speaking, at least our audience, the folks who voted, were saying they expected stuff to be more interactive, more engaging. That was also right after we did a show on Bandersnatch, which was on Netflix, where they used interactive video. And one of the things we've been talking about on the show a lot is sort of building on your personalization point. You know, if you do well-designed e-learning edutainment that allows the user to make decisions, and then based on the decisions she makes, she sees different things. That's something that I think, to your point, people had been talking about the promise of that for many years. I think that was something, at least as of last year, folks started to sense the future is here now. Like, we can actually start building more engaging, interactive stuff so that learning becomes less of a lean back, more of a lean in experience. So that was why interactive everything won last year. There's a few ideas similar to it that are in this year. There's something around simulations. I think we were calling it simu-learning. But the idea that, you know, people, and that relates a little bit to AR, like you're talking about, where like, or virtual reality, where rather than, you know, watch flat video or listen to audio, what if I could actually experience a simulation that's going to feel like what it's going to feel like to be in a new context down the road? That's something that had been a little more hypothetical, theoretical in the past, and now I think we're starting to see it pick up traction. So like, these things, to your point, are already here, but they're picking up traction, picking up pace, getting more broad awareness, and those are the types of things that tend to catch fire. As we mentioned, this year has been kind of nuts in terms of 2020 election cycle, coronavirus, you know, Kobe Bryant's tragic crash. So it's just like the amount of noise coming in from the outside is pretty pervasive and hard to navigate as learners, as people who are trying to like understand the educational landscape. So I think that might be part of the zeitgeist, but who knows? It's going to be up to our voters, you know?
It's definitely going to be one of the things that I don't know if it's going to make our top list, but one of the trends I see that is going to be super interesting to watch is Internet of Things, right?
Yes.
I think the more just the watch experience and how the watch gives us information, how you see it in all the heart rate monitors that you saw me talking about. I think bringing those things into the classroom and bringing more different experiences rather than just reading on a book or something, it's got to start coming out more and more. And particularly as we talk about healthcare education and other places and skills training and so forth, I think those things are going to become a much more important aspect. Don't know if we'll make the list today, but I'm holding out hope for it.
Yeah, well, and you have influence as part of the selection committee, so there may be a chance that it does make it in. But like, what had been called wearables, you know, sensor technology, which we talked about recently when we were looking at the innovation landscape for the 2020s. we did a show on hearables too, which was interesting. Wearable tech that's in your ear that perhaps could have sensors or could have other ways to kind of pick up on your ideas over time. But yeah, it's an interesting time where that technology happens. And then another aspect of the brackets, something that we do try to talk about regularly on the show, is sort of the counterforce to that, which is last year was captured as screenlessness. We may have screenlessness come back in again this year. We also talk a lot about mindfulness.
Yeah.
Just the value of turning things off is an interesting counterpoint, because I think you're right in that the smart educator who can bring good intentional use of new technology into the classroom is going to be able to unlock new potential. But the flip side is, like, we did a few shows on the backlash against technology in the classroom, Summit Education in particular. There's been a good amount of backlash against that Chan Zuckerberg powered initiative, where the personalized learning almost becomes dehumanizing. So this is where parents have been complaining about their quote unquote zombie kids, because it winds up being a glorified tech enabled study hall in its worst context, where the teacher says, all right, power up your personalized learning. I want to be at my desk. And then we'll check in 45 minutes, and which comes back to the idea of the power of the human in the equation, which is one of the themes, one of the trends that Rohit is talking about is he calls human mode. And that's, in a world where more and more stuff is being powered by non-human agents, there will be a tendency among consumers, among learners, among people who are seeking solutions to find solutions that do have some sort of human component, some aspect of connecting that and all the emotional stuff that almost runs as like a counter force to the more cognitive and technology powered stuff. Kind of goes full circle back to our first bracket, where artificial intelligence, machine learning tied with the importance of teachers.
And I think you're always going to see that, right? You're always going to see them as a yin yang. I happen to like my personal belief on where this is going to go. I think like technology, learning by technology is going to have a role to play. I think the human as a coach is for sure where it's going to go. And so I would argue that we're not hitting it right if we're in the classroom and we're just having the students just sit in front of a classroom and in front of a computer and use it. I think the value of the computer is for one-on-one time and learning at your own pace. And then like the engagement in the classroom becomes much more about the teacher and the coaching model and learning. A perfect example, and not quite parallel, right, is like even in the workplace, trying to move away from presentations to things you read from beforehand, and then when you get into the room, if you've read it ahead of time, it becomes a much more engaging conversation than just write a download. And I think too much of classes today are still downloads, and so that's where I think technology helps give that download and allows people to download at their own speed, and then you come into the class on much more equal footing. And that's a little bit of the flipped classroom, which probably hasn't made its way back into trends, but something I think needs to happen a lot more in order for education to really work.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And it does remind me also of the importance of good facilitation and modeling of collaborative, equitable, inclusive environment, trying to hear from everybody in a class, even the more introverted students, and not allowing the gunners to sort of dominate the conversation, or give them room to operate with some independence and autonomy, but also, dedicating enough time and resourcing to help the kids who may have more to deal with in their home life, or just, I like to view myself as a recovering introvert. I do think there are techniques that are help, like we're starting to give more emotional tooling to teachers to help them teach the whole student, and the whole student, whole teacher, whole community. It takes a village idea. I think is one that, like you're talking about, it's been out there for a long time, but sometimes things catch a tailwind suddenly, and the timing is right, and they kind of burst forward as like the clear winner. And then also I think this year it could be a pretty wide open field where it may just depend on who's voting, what catches their attention. We'd love our listeners to vote. You can make predictions. How do I get as many diverse voices, as many diverse perspectives to be able to actively engage in the topics that we're talking about? And that is something that feels like a macro trend. That is something that, we're trying to model that. We're trying to sort of lean into that idea. But do you have any thoughts on that sort of broader set of trends?
I mean, as you were saying it was coming to mind. It's almost like there are a bunch of macro trends that are gonna for sure drive education. Like we talked a lot about them, and not to reiterate the show we did last, but I cannot help but believe that the 5G movement for sure, and that it's gonna enable education in rural countries and so forth. And so it's got to be looked at as a trend as you tied that with then the need for like more non-human, at least at the start, learning or personalized learning to get it into localized learning, so that like not teaching students in Africa with an American curriculum. I think you're like making it much more like personalized to their area. It's going to be things that are going to change the future. For sure, education it's got to go more global.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things you're going to see.
Yeah, and your point about healthcare education is another good one too, because like one of the challenges we've always had with these brackets, and we just allow it to be a challenge, and we still power forward, is the timeliness. Does this apply to 2020 or does it apply to the next 5 to 10 years? I think if we were to, everyone's going to be voting based on whatever they want to vote on. I do think it's interesting just to talk about voting on anything in March of 2020. Hopefully there won't be too many bot farms that are flooding. Like if we include bots and bots suddenly get millions of votes, we may need to open up a parallel investigation just to make sure that things are operating on the up and up.
But let's hope whatever software we use also works when we roll it out to vote. But too soon.
Or not soon enough. But I mean, that will be what 2020 is very much about as well, is at least in the US. So much is going to be tied to this election mumbo jumbo. And, when you start thinking forward into the year, what's going to feel like, heading into the election of 2020 in the US, not to mention, we talked about the coronavirus. Is that going to continue to go bonkers? There are some, one trend that we haven't necessarily talked about in the brackets, and maybe this is a late addition, but just scenario-based thinking, which is, from all I've been, simulations kind of relate to this. The more you get in the habit of anticipating, visualizing possible futures, and understanding that there's many varied ones out there, a lot of the research that I've been reading about this says that that's just a very healthy practice, because it kind of sets you up for surprisingly good outcomes when you can be opportunistic, surprisingly negative worst case scenarios where you have your fail safes ready, and then also just more of an orientation towards being able to respond to new, different, unexpected. And if you can't respond to novel, unexpected these days, you better start learning how to do that, because, building on what we just were talking about last time we talked, was the idea that the amount of change in the next 10 years is likely to be more than we've seen in the past 40. I'm coming around to that thinking. Like I am starting to believe that it is going to be a decade, the 2020s are going to be a decade of tremendous change and disruption. So maybe some trends that talk about being like training learners from as early a possible age to be ready to respond to this deeply transformative world that we'd be living in, especially at a time when K-12 and higher ed may struggle to change as fast as the world around us changes. And
as you were talking, that's what I was thinking about. One of the things I look for when I look for trends is what will actually disrupt the status quo. And so I think a lot of it, even like even like micro learning, which I know we've talked about
Yep.
in the past, and skills-based learning. I think we say it every year, and it's going to be true one year.
Yeah.
Higher ed is ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
It has not. It's being disrupted, but it's being disrupted slowly right now. It's gonna continue, because the more, like we've talked about it on the show in the past, like Amazon launching AWS as a school and train on that. Like more and more of those things are gonna happen,
Mhm.
and the me needing to go to a 4-year education it's going to seem less and less likely when I can enter the workforce directly out of high school, or even while in high school, if I
Right.
picked up all these other trainings. And so that's one of the things I would look for. I mean, to your point, there's always the counterpoint to that,
Right.
which is like, as you can learn and as you can get into the, if I can learn at a faster pace as my students, and I can actually gain all these skills at 14 or 15, am I ready for the workforce, and have I learned socially enough? And is that what college is? It's finishing school for
Right.
my emotional maturity. And those are the things that I think, when we eventually speed up how kids get there, like Zuckerberg being a perfect example. He may have become CEO. I'm sorry, Mark. He may have become CEO too early for his
Right.
maturity level. And
Right.
it's those things that we shouldn't really call them soft skills. They're skills that you need. And
Yeah.
you hear Brandon Bastide, one of my colleagues here at Kaplan, talks about that a lot. And it's talking
Mhm.
about it. It's not like it's the soft skills are things you really need. And as we focus on these more traditional skills, those how we bring those other skills up are going to be important, especially for people less mature than the
Yeah.
rest of us.
Totally. I mean, and it relates also
Yeah.
to what we've been talking about around um, what sorts of things will artificial intelligence take on, and then what will that leave for humans to engage with. A lot of the stuff that the humans are going to have to engage with are going to be interpersonal, social, collaborative, and creative.
Yeah.
And what are we doing, even from early childhood ed right through
Yeah.
K-12, right through higher ed into the workforce, lifelong learning? How far along are we in each of those places, and then where will we see the greatest transformation in 2020, and then maybe in a longer time horizon? So speaking of time horizons, we're almost done here, Melissa. So any parting thoughts? We're going to continue to be talking about these brackets over the next month and change, but any parting thoughts, any suggestions, any recommendations for our listeners?
I mean, as you all know, I'm always pushing for the robot overlord, so I'm pushing for any trend that brings AI to the forefront.
Nice, nice. Hashtag Team AI, and then I will stalwartly continue to advocate for hashtag Team Human. It's kind of like the Twilight movies, right? Team Jacob or Team
Yeah, I don't
Edward,
know.
right?
But you're. It's curious. I'm so curious to see where Rohit is gonna come down, because I think you might be stacking the deck for you. But I'm ready to go to war with both of you guys.
And we want to bring back trusted friends and compatriots who've been with us along the way. One of those compatriots is Brandon Jones. And we're fortunate enough to get a little bit of Brandon's perspective on Training in Education's March Madness through the years. Brandon was with us when we began this in 2017, was with us down in Austin in the March of 2019. We're going to be back down there in March of 2020. Brandon will be with us in spirit, and then we're hoping to get a little bit of his spirit as audio. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. It is, thinking about this one, if you're recording a podcast in February that's going to drop in March,
Right.
I think I'm living in the future.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So
I got a futurist mindset on for this conversation.
Well, I would say yes, and in the future, you're living in the past. So like, what?
Wow. Yeah, this is the perception of time, and my human role in it is so interesting. So yeah, living in the future. Happy to be talking about the past. I mean, we've been doing this now. This is our fourth year. I'm happy to be part of the hour, and I will be a listener as you and other friends talk about this in future episodes. But I think it's a good opportunity, that we started doing and then liked it enough and got at least some positive feedback from our listenership that they liked it too, to be through the format that exists for the NCAA basketball tournaments, to be able to pair up and pit against each other some trends that we think are going to impact the world and us in it, and see which of those bubble to the top through audience participation. So I think it's a lot of fun, and glad to be back here doing it.
Yeah, and now, great to have you back. And now that we've done it so many times, technically 3, soon to be 4, there's time for us to wax nostalgic and think back over the years and think about the through lines and the trend lines and the predictions, both for the ones that were right. So, I think you kind of nailed it year 2 with kid solving, which soon transformed into the activation of the students in Florida, in Parkland, Florida, after the tragic event down there, how they then led a movement, and we now see that with climate change as well. So like, it does seem like, we catch lightning in a bottle. You, to your credit, were able to do that in 2018. Anything that jumps to mind? I mean, you could do one more victory lap.
For folks who have not been part of the training and education family for the past several years, I thought maybe it might be worth taking just a quick trip down memory lane. They're easy for me to say. Yeah. In the first year, this is still one of the great mysteries of my life, Mike Palmer, and I've lived for through many mysteries. We didn't have a winner, so we've done this for 3 years.
Yeah.
But we have 4 winners. How does that happen, one might ask? And I will tell you.
Yeah.
Because in our first year, we had a tie.
Yeah.
And the tie was between AI/machine learning and the importance of teachers.
Yeah.
And we did this. We polled the audience. We talked to the machines. Multiple times. And we just couldn't have one of them win. It ended up being a tie.
Right.
So I thought that was the curiosity of the tie aside. I think that we were also right about AI machine learning.
Yeah.
I think we've just been talking about this on this show recently about AI as a trend that's going to change the next 10 years as much as the past several or more.
Yeah.
And the importance of teachers. Fan favorite, where I'm the fan here. That's one that I think will always continue to be the case. You already talked about kid solving in 2018, and then in 2019, interactive everything was the winner there. And I will say, when everything is in the mix, that is a strong competitor. So that's what we've done. And now these are getting into they're getting a bronze bus, going up in the Hall of Fame and not being included in this year's consideration? What's the plan with that?
So the 4 winners, soon to be 5, once, hopefully, assuming there's no tie. And
that's a big assumption. I mean, there's a tie 33% of the time. I mean,
have more rigorous methodology. We're going to adopt the Elam ending. So
my Bayesian prior would say that there could be a tie here.
It's a 1 in 3 chance we're going to tie based on previous data. But like, that tie was kind of perfect in its own way, and it was also the first time we were doing it. And when you're pitting the humanity #TeamHuman against the AI #TeamRobots. And you come to the conclusion that it's too close to call, too early to call. Say whatever you want about it, but like, it's too complicated to identify a single winner. In some ways, that does seem like a next level insight. That if
I thought so, I agree.
If one of them won, it would have been a little off. So instead, we said, it was also a little zeitgeisty in that both AI and the importance of teachers got a participation trophy that first year.
Right.
They'll both be retired and in our Hall of Fame. Same thing for kid solving, same thing for interactive everything. And we're just in the early stages of defining the field. That will be live in the next week or 2. So like, we're planning to go live in early March, and then we will be down at South by Southwest. March 11th is when we'll be live down there. And that's when we'll, in front of a live audience in Austin, go through the results of the first round, and we'll be at our Sweet 16 by that point, and then we'll be heading towards the conclusion of this round, and our new winner will be anointed right around early April. Brandon, any thoughts on trends. I know you were on one of our trend prediction shows for 2020. Any high-level takes on where the smart money might be this go-around? Because keep in mind, listeners, not only do you consume this and vote on this, you're also able to predict who will win, and the winner of the prediction side of this gets to appear on Trending in Education. So it's a nice thing there. So Brandon, as an industry insider, as someone who's seen this 3 years running, any thoughts without going too deep on a specific prediction?
Yeah, I do. And I will sort of maybe give a meta answer to this. Is never meta answer I didn't like, especially with insider's perspective. And I'm not sure if our listeners will be able to see the boards from years past. But I would say since winners of the past have been retired, one might look to runners up from the past, right? Or other trends that have fared well in the past.
Yeah.
Right. So, in the past, there was no runner-up, as we've joked about, from 2017. In 2018, the runner-up was fake news.
Sure.
And in 2019, the runner-up was human-centered STEM.
Sure.
I would think, it depends on what the time horizon is. And we talked about this a lot. Like if we're talking just 2020, I would be betting on things that involve, at least for those listeners here in the United States of America, would be things that tie to the 2020 election.
Yes.
2020 vision you've talked about. I can't believe that no one has done more publicly with that. That's just that's a great term. I'm sure people have used it, but no one's owned that as much as I think they could.
Yeah.
But there's going to be fake news. There's going to be things involving privacy and data and security. And, I think all of that has a real chance of being a winner, especially if we've got a really U.S.-centric voting population here.
Yeah.
We welcome, I think I can speak for you on this too, Mike. We welcome international listenership as well.
Yeah.
But in the here at home in the U.S., that is big news. So that would be my guess. I would say, and I would be interested, as a part-time guest and regular listener, I would be interested to hear how different trends that have appeared in more than 1 year's bracket perform over time. So, like, what are the advancers in the eyes of our listener, in the ears of our listeners, and what are the decliners?
Yeah.
Those would be some early thoughts. Look to see what's done well, but not won in the past, and I'm looking forward to hearing how those trends trend this year.
Yeah, and just to call back to your previous show with us, prediction-wise, behavioral health, mindfulness, things that are almost antidotes to the 24/7 breaking news, inundation of new media, mass media, social media, finding those places to be more restorative and focused on ourselves, and also focused on how we can engage with others in a pro-social way. That is an interesting macro trend, and I did want to give you your due, because I'm not sure exactly how that's going to manifest in the brackets as we finalize it. But
find room, baby. I think you're right. And I think, whether that sort of morphs into something different, you have pointed out, I think rightly, I'm sure you're not the first to, but you've said often to me that, there are counter trends really for every material trend. And I do think that's one that I personally hope will gain some additional traction. I think it already is, but I'm hoping that is an alternative to, I think, the less positive, less enabling, less building people up, all those other things that we just talked about. I'm hoping that some of the counter ends up being more the trend.
Yeah. And for our listeners, participate. We want to get you excited about this. We're going to be sharing more information about it. We'll be doing some additional shows in addition to our normal catalog. You'll get some extra shows in March that are talking about the March Madness, culminating in our big whiz-bang culmination.
I will say, I know I'm interrupting, I apologize, but before I wrap, I one piece of nostalgia that I forgot to mention, and listeners can still go find this in the back catalog, is our first year we did do some 8 Mile style. It's a little rap face-off, a little rap battle. So, I think finding a sparring partner and it was all done with love, but finding a sparring partner who can sort of unpack some of these on this show, I think would be interesting as you get further into probably past the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to want to do that for 16 of them again, but the last 4, last 8, something like that. I'd love to hear a little deeper dive treatment from you and the friends of the show on that.
Yeah, and as a friend of the show, maybe we even bring you back for a little bit.
I still got the keys to the dojo, so we can head there.
We look forward to kicking this off in March, having some time down in Austin. If you're there, we'd love to see you. And then hopefully folks will get excited. And then while we're doing this, we're still going to be running regular training and education shows that you've come to know and love really right throughout this period. So trying to get a little bit of the both end going where we'll continue to identify new trends, interview great thinkers and authors and things, but we'll also dedicate a decent amount of time over the next month and change to cover our brackets and the wild and wacky that turns into March Madness for us every year. So thanks again for listening. We'll be back again soon on Trending in Education.